how many people do you talk to that are like, oh, we already do that? And what they're thinking of when they say we already do win-loss analysis is we track it in our CRM.
97.5%.
Okay.
Almost everyone.
So most companies are really early in the win-loss maturity curve. They're in those very first stages.
Yep.
The only thing worse than losing a big deal or missing quota is not knowing why. Here at Closed, we've conducted tens of thousands of buyer interviews for hundreds of B2B companies, and we've uncovered what drives your prospects to buy, not buy, or even churn. In each episode of the Win-Loss Show, we'll show you how you can leverage feedback directly from your buyers to help you increase your win rate, perfect your sales experience, nail your marketing messaging, build the right products, and hit your quota with confidence.
Hey everybody, welcome to the show. My name is Nate Bagley. I'm the head of content at Closed, and I'm here today with our internal win-loss guy, Cam England. Thanks for being here, Cam.
Absolutely.
So today we're going to talk about something really important, and I think it's important to understanding win-loss analysis as a whole, is that there tends to be a natural evolution for businesses and how they get introduced to win-loss analysis and how their win-loss analysis efforts evolve over time. And knowing this information is important because it's important to know that maybe like where you are in this life cycle so that you know what's coming up next and what you need to prepare for, and maybe what your strengths and weaknesses are given your current understanding of why you're winning and losing. So with that context, let's break down this win-loss maturity curve, which is kind of an internal term that we use. Now you can use it as well, and help our listeners understand a little bit more about what win-loss analysis often looks like at the beginning, how it evolves over time, and the value at each stage that we can get out of it.
Yeah.
So can you take me to the very beginning stages of maybe how a company starts doing win-loss analysis in your experience?
Yeah. Normally there's always some sort of catalyst. There's some infighting, there's some finger pointing. It's the end of the quarter and there's a big deal that was lost. It was super painful. We thought we had it in the bag and it didn't come through. Could be a whole bunch of different things, could look like a lot of different things, but there's some sort of catalyst, there's some sort of reason that raised questions around, hey, let's get to the root of what's going on as it relates to our win rate or what's happening as far as why we're winning and losing business.
Got it. So there's this big question mark and then a problem that needs to be solved. I'm sure oftentimes there's a lot of infighting, one department, speaking as a marketer, it's like, we got a marketer and a sales guy in here. There could be some finger pointing. It's like, oh, you guys aren't sending us enough leads. Or on the other hand, it could be like, oh, the leads that you're sending us aren't great. Or we're sending you amazing leads, but you're doing a terrible job closing them. Or maybe the product team gets involved. And it's like, you're not building the right products. And they're like, are you kidding? We just built the feature you've been asking for, but you're not even selling it. So I'm sure there's a lot of maybe opinions that happen initially. So walk me through like what the early stages of win-loss analysis looks like in a company when you've got this big question mark about why are we actually losing?
Yeah. So most individuals, most companies realize that you need some data. You need to base your decisions off some sort of evidence. It's not a good idea to operate solely off anecdotes. And so once it's been established that there is a problem or there's a question, the next place to look and the next step is, okay, where can we turn to start to get answers to that questions? And the next step, the most logical step, where every company goes is, well, let's go and look at the CRM. So as the sales team is working opportunities, as they're working deals through the sales life cycle, let's see what information we're capturing. And particularly where that most often boils down to is the loss code or the loss reason that sales will tag or identify as they're closing out an opportunity. And this will vary a little bit company to company. In its most basic form, I don't know that there's ever been an organization that I've spoken with that hasn't had at least a basic pick list. So I'm a sales rep. I lose an opportunity. I have a list of 3, 4, 5 categories that I can pick from around why that deal was lost. So it could be pricing, it could be timing, it could be, unresponsive is a very common one. It could be, I could, indict myself, I could say it was something related to the sales process, but some sort of workflow. It can be a little bit more robust where there can be, some text boxes or some other drop downs that I can select from as a sales rep. But that's where companies rightly go after that is, well, let's go and see what information is being captured from the sales team. Let's start to see if we can get some context or some color around, hey, is it a product related issue? Is it our sales team? Is it XYZ? Is it pricing or whatever it may be? So the CRM is the first place. Once we've established that there's a question to go and answer, the CRM is where we go to next.
Now, what percentage of people do you talk to, revenue leaders, that are in one of these first two stages? They're either making guesses and using anecdotes and assumptions, that finger pointing phase where they're just kind of going off of maybe people's firsthand experience, sales reps, leaders, their assumptions, and the CRM phase. How many people do you talk to that are like, oh, we already do that? And what they're thinking of when they say we already do win-loss analysis is we track it in our CRM, or we have maybe a quarterly post-mortem on some of our big deals.
97.5%.
Okay.
Almost everyone.
So most companies are really early in the win-loss maturity curve. They're in those very first stages.
Yep.
Let's talk about some of the strengths and of these two early phases and why they can be useful. And then let's also talk about some of their weaknesses and why it's necessary to evolve past them.
Yeah. For the obvious strength is low barrier to entry. So if I'm a CRO or I'm a head of sales, I can mandate that my sales team follows this workflow and they provide some sort of information around why a deal was won or lost. So very low barrier to entry. You can have very high compliance in terms of mandating that every single sales rep, as they close out an opportunity, provides some level of information. From an accessibility standpoint, again, very similar. I can have either myself or my, Salesforce or CRM admin, I can have my sales ops leader go and run any number of reports from that CRM data. So it's at my fingertips. I can mandate compliance. And so I can, in theory, get full pipeline coverage. I can collect feedback around every single opportunity that gets closed out. The downside to only relying on your CRM data is it's biased. So if you think about the source of that information, you're fully relying on your sales rep to provide information around why a deal was won or lost. And that's conjecture. They're providing their best guess, their best opinion.
It's one side of the story.
It's one side of the story. And sometimes they may be accurate. It's not to say that a sales rep is never right around why a deal was won or lost. But you aren't going straight to the source of truth, which is ultimately your buyer. So that's the big glaring weakness when it comes to solely relying on CRM data, is you don't have the full picture and you don't have information from the source that you ultimately care the most about.
Yeah. And I think it's important to point out that like sales reps, most of the time, are not being malicious or intentionally manipulative with this data. In my personal experience, I don't think the buyers are always 100% transparent with the sales reps about why they tell them the most convenient and palatable reason why they lose a deal. It's kind of like breaking up with your first girlfriend, it's the whole, it's not you, it's me. You tell them the easy thing when really there might be other reasons behind the curtain.
But she tells her friend and then her friend tells you, and then you get more color.
Friends with a friend.
Yeah.
Even in our experience here at Closed, what I've noticed is that most of the win-loss interviews that we conduct, the buyer lists roughly 4 to 5 different reasons that impacted the outcome of a deal, whether it's closed won or closed lost. And if you use the pick list, it tells you one reason.
Yeah.
And oftentimes that reason doesn't even match up with the 4 or 5 that the buyer shared.
Yep.
So I think it's important to recognize that the CRM can give you data, but the cheap, easy data is not always the most accurate or informative data.
Absolutely. And another thing that came to mind in terms of some of the drawbacks of solely relying on CRM data, and this isn't uniform across every organization, but it's most definitely the common practice, is nothing is captured on a one opportunity. So there are times where like the customer success organization or whoever's responsible for onboarding a new client might send out a survey or try and collect some level of feedback there. But as far as having an apples to apples data set for my loss opportunities, I have this mandated workflow where a sales rep is providing information around why a deal was lost. Almost never or very rarely are the same questions or similar questions being asked when an opportunity is won. So what we're ignoring is trying to nail down what the winning recipe is. Like we're good at identifying, or at least attempting to identify, the most common loss reasons, but why are we not doing the opposite and also trying to nail down the most common reasons why we win deals?
Can you tell me a quick story of the value of studying your wins instead of just studying your losses?
So we had one client that we worked with that was super focused on a primary competitor, and they were going to make some huge organizational adjustments and changes to figure out how they could better compete with um, that particular competitor. And they'd done a whole bunch of loss analysis. They've tried to figure out and get a good understanding of where they were falling short against that competitor. And what they almost failed to do was go and analyze their wins to understand, well, what are we doing right when we go toe to toe against that competitor? And one thing that they actually found was there were very similar reasons on their loss interviews that were being conducted with these buyers that were very similar to some of the one reasons
Hmm.
that were being conducted with their buyers. And so what it ultimately boiled down to is you started to peel back the layers and understand like why are those similarities is there was a big gap from a sales enablement perspective, from a sales training perspective. So you had some cohort of sales reps that were very effective in some areas as they were selling against this particular competitor and had a very strong win rate. And you had other sales reps, a different cohort of sales reps that hadn't received that same level of training. And there were a couple of discrepancies from an enablement perspective, but were losing very similar types of deals because of that gap. And so as before they started making these huge product adjustments, these pricing adjustments, and what would have been very expensive changes as a business, they were able to take a step back, analyze their wins, and then realize, oh, it's actually more related to our sales process and how we're enabling our new sales reps, as opposed to all of these huge product and pricing changes that we need to overhaul and change.
That's huge.
So,
I heard another recent story of one of our customers who started studying their wins, and their closed won customers, it came up regularly in their closed won interviews. Hey, we found so much value in this, we probably actually would have paid more for it.
yeah.
And then after hearing that consistently from a large number of those closed won deals, the revenue team decided, well, why don't we bump up our pricing? And they increased
Mhm.
their pricing by 30% and didn't see like a dip in win rates.
Yeah.
It's like an overnight increase of 30%
Yeah. That's
in
huge
your
for
annual
margins.
revenue.
Yep.
Yeah. And so they wouldn't have had that if they hadn't paid attention to their wins.
Yep.
Love that.
Yep.
Thanks for sharing your story
Yeah.
with me. One other question I had while we're still on the CRM topic is what's the danger of relying heavily on CRM data to inform you on why you're winning and losing?
The obvious flaw is just it lacks context. So
Mm.
even if I have a really compliant sales team that is very diligent about providing, as much information as they can around why a deal was lost, if I go and run that report in my CRM and I get a whole bunch of feedback that we're losing because of price, I have no idea what that means.
Right.
Like that could be 5 different issues. It could be issues with the sticker price. It could be from, the contracting process was confusing as far as like what am I being billed for? How am I being billed?
Right.
So a lack of clarity or transparency there. It could be, yeah, year 1 is great, but years 2 through 5, it doesn't scale well with my business. Like if I am losing because of pricing, there's still a lot of other follow-up questions that I need
Yeah.
to get answers for before I actually go and do
Wow.
anything as a business.
It's so interesting that you bring that up. I talked to a customer a few weeks ago, and he was telling us this very story. He's like, we thought our pricing, the clarity and simplicity of our pricing was one of our pillars,
Mhm.
was one of our strengths. And we kept hearing in our closed loss interviews that pricing was a factor. And they're like, what is going on? Like, why, if this is we believe it's a strength, why
Mhm.
are our buyers seeing it as a weakness? So they went back and actually studied their gong calls,
Mhm.
their sales call recordings, and found out on those deals where they were being knocked because pricing was an issue. They found out that the sales reps were providing too many options. So their pricing was simple, but they were providing too many options to their buyers. So maybe they had like a mid-market buyer and they were providing them with enterprise level pricing,
Customization.
yeah, all sorts
Yeah.
of pricing options that weren't relevant to them.
Yep.
And so they're like, oh, we need to make sure that we're only presenting the options that are most relevant to the prospect that we're selling to.
Yeah.
And that changed things. So they may have had really clear pricing, but pricing was still an issue because the way they were presenting it was confusing.
Yep.
So
And
pricing can mean so much.
and you don't learn that from selecting pricing as your drop
Yeah.
down.
I heard another story a couple of months ago of a company they lost a huge deal because of pricing, but really the reason when they went in and did the interview was that they got the pricing to the buying team late.
Mm.
So their competitors were 2 weeks ahead of them, and they were already had negotiated pricing and kind of locked in numbers. And then this our client came in, gave them a number, and they're like, "Oh, it's too late, guys. We're like way down the road
Yeah.
with your competitor."
Yeah. There was one interview for a client of mine, and they were really confused about why they lost this deal because they put together what they thought was a really robust proposal. They tried to get really aggressive with the price point and make it obviously as appealing as possible. And they lost the deal. We came in, we did our analysis to talk with the buyer, understand, hey, why was company XYZ eliminated? And they got eliminated because their price was too low. So when the company first received that proposal, they were immediately skeptical and essentially dismissed that RFP response because they immediately assumed there's no way that we can get the level of service and support that we are expecting we're going to need with this project at that price point.
Wow.
So, when you think we lost the deal because of price, you almost always assume we were too high. They went with a cheaper option. In this case, and you don't know unless you verify with the buyer, this company lost the deal because they were too cheap. Like there was a lack of confidence in what they would be able to deliver at that price point. So they got eliminated.
Got it. So CRM data is good at telling you roughly what's happening, but not giving you any insight into why it's happening, the nitty-gritty details.
Yeah.
So let's dive to the next section of the win-loss maturity curve after the CRM. Where do companies go from here once they realize CRM data is not enough?
Yeah. So once, they still have some outstanding questions that the CRM didn't quite answer, they'll usually try to be a little bit more proactive and maybe dedicate some additional resources when it comes to answering those questions. And it'll usually reflect back on whatever it was that spurred that initial question. So it could be, hey, we're looking at our CRM and we're noticing we have a dip in our North American enterprise deals. Or, hey, we're noticing that we see this particular competitor coming up a lot more often in an area that we weren't expecting. Or we just launched this new product and it's not gaining the traction that we were quite expecting. So they've noticed this problem. The CRM's kind of confirmed it and pointed them in a direction that they might want to go explore. And they'll go do some sort of more formalized kind of one-off project where they'll go focus on that product line or that geography or against that competitor. And in most cases, they'll kind of mature. If we go back to the keyword there, they'll kind of graduate into understanding, okay, if we want to get more context and color, we need to turn to our buyers. We need to go in and tap into the source that actually has the answers. And they'll go with the focus of that core problem or that first problem. So let's go and talk to, all the deals that we've lost against that particular competitor in the last 2 months. Or let's go and talk to all of the opportunities that evaluated this new product or were in this new geography or whatever it may be. So it usually graduates from that CRM data as the sole source of information to let's go do a more targeted or a more formal project or approach to a particular segment or pocket of the business.
Let's go talk to 10 of the buyers that we lost to this competitor.
Yep.
Or let's go talk to a handful of buyers who wanted this product but didn't buy
Yep.
it. Got it. So it's more of a project-based investigation of why are we winning and losing with regards to this specific problem.
Yep.
And typically what happens when a client or a business, some leaders start to find answers around one of these questions?
Yeah. It will. So we can kind of talk through the
Let's go through the process.
the process and the pros and cons there. So typically when we're working with a company to try and help build out a more formal approach to win-loss analysis, we kind of think of it as a crawl, walk, run rollout. And so what we're describing now is kind of that walking phase where it's okay, we're starting to whet our appetite. We're starting to get some really good answers to that one particular question. Now we can do something about it. So now I have some outside information, some really well-vetted information around, okay, was it actually an issue with the product? Was it actually an issue with the demo customization? Was it an issue with our pricing? So now I have this one uh, this first problem that initially sparked my interest and kind of kicked off this process, I realized that I can get some really rich answers around what happened there. But that's usually just a very, very small slice of the pie. That's one segment of the total pipeline. And there's all these other outstanding questions. So that's where leaders will start to realize, hey, this has been really good, but this was very targeted. This was very narrow. If we are truly going to get serious about understanding why we win and lose business, we got to think bigger.
Mm. Okay. There's one aspect of doing this is that you find answers to questions that you already had or
Hmm.
problems that you're trying to solve. And in doing this, I'm assuming what happens often is you come across new problems that you didn't even know existed.
Yeah.
And then you start to go, oh, how many of these invisible problems exist in my business? How many things are happening, or are we doing poorly, or are we just opportunities that we're missing to serve our
Hmm.
customers better that we just don't know because we haven't asked?
Yeah.
Because we've operated for so long on assumptions and CRM data that tell me what's happening, but I haven't sat down and talked to my buyers and really found out why. Like, why are you making this
Yeah.
decision? And you might think like, oh yeah, it's a feature that we're missing, or oh, we need to customize our demos better. And then you find out there's also like 3 or 4 other issues that you didn't even know were a thing that you hadn't even considered. Like your price point's too low. Like whoever sits in a post-mortem and goes, I'll bet our pricing was too low. Like
Yeah.
nobody says that. But when it comes up from a buyer, it's like, oh, maybe we need to rethink how we're selling to this specific
Yeah.
type of customer.
Yeah. And
I'm sure that
I'm kicking myself if I ever lose a deal because
yeah, he left money on
the
the
price
table.
is too low.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm sure that does whet their appetite. So what's
Mhm.
the next phase after they complete this project?
So the next phase is to really roll things out, and do a much more comprehensive program in the sense of an ongoing program.
Mm.
I is probably a better word
So
there.
it's not just like a limited, like 15 or 20 buyer interviews. It's like, oh, well, let's interview every customer who goes up against this competitor.
Yeah. And the next dimension that you kind of add into it. So the two things that are missing with kind of this one-off or this discrete research project is both a time component.
Mhm.
So having something that's more ongoing, which I'll dive into in a sec. And then the other one is width or kind of broadness of the program.
Yeah.
So the examples that we focused on now, it's a specific competitor, it's a specific geography, it's a specific product line. That's a very narrow view. And it's also this point in time. And depending on my business, depending on the industry that I'm in, depending on the competitive landscape, I only want to operate off of that data for a limited period of time.
Mm.
So even if I go do a world-class research project and get some fantastic information around why we're winning and losing against that particular competitor, that is information that is relevant here and now. I don't want to be operating off that same information 12 months from now because it's going to become stale.
Yeah.
I change as an organization. This competitor that I'm focused on is going to change as an organization. The market in general is going to change. And so I can't operate forever off that initial data set. So the next phase is to think about, okay, we need to continually monitor why we're winning and losing against this competitor. And so that's where you get into more of a programmatic approach to win-loss, where it's ongoing, it's continuous, you're keeping a pulse on that competitor. So that's that length dimension. But the other piece is width. So great if I know why I'm winning and losing over time against that one competitor, but what about the 9 other competitors
Mm.
that I'm going up against? Or great, I know why I'm winning in Europe, but what about the US? What about Asia? Or hey, I know why or how we're performing with this particular product line, but what about the other 9 products that we sell?
Maybe we're crushing it in enterprise, but we're really struggling in mid-market. Like, how
Yep.
are we doing there?
Yep.
Yeah.
And so that's where, if you think about that win loss maturity curve, that's where we get to the gold standard, kind of the capstone, which is not only is this an ongoing program where I'm continually soliciting feedback from these buyers as these opportunities close, but it's also pipeline comprehensive. So I'm reaching out to collect feedback from every single won and lost opportunity coming through my pipeline so that I have complete visibility into why I'm winning and losing deals across all of my opportunities, across all of my pipeline, not one little subset.
I love that. Now let's do a comparison.
Yeah.
What do you see is the big difference in the way that companies build their strategy, their go-to-market strategy, they build their products, uh, comparing companies who maybe are in that guessing phase, the anecdotes or the CRM phase, compared to somebody who's doing like a comprehensive, ongoing, broad, over time win-loss analysis program?
Yeah, I think one of the most underrated benefits of having a comprehensive ongoing win-loss program is speed. So if I'm an organization and I'm mulling over adjustments that I should make as a business, whether it be to my competitive strategy, whether it be to my product offering, whether it be to how we price and package, that can be a very slow process where there's a lot of infighting, there's a lot of headbutting, there's a lot of deliberation around what's the right move, and that takes time. If I am continually collecting feedback from my buyers in real time around why they're making the decisions that they do, I can clearly see, oh, we've lost these 20 deals in the last month because of this issue. Let's go and fix that. I'm not telling my product leader to go and fix that because I think that's the right choice. I'm not telling my marketing leader to go and do this differently because I think that's the right choice. We are all looking at the same data set that's from our buyer saying, if you want my business next time, you need to go and do this differently. So the speed that businesses can take action on when they have this real-time buyer feedback is a huge competitive advantage. So that's I think probably one of the biggest advantages of a more comprehensive win-loss program.
And now let's talk for a minute about some of the advantages these companies get that are unexpected, that most people, when they maybe hire us
Mhm.
to do win-loss analysis, they don't expect to see these bonus benefits.
Yeah. Yeah. So one, it's always a fun, yeah, kind of a bonus ROI that we'll see is ramp time, especially for new sales reps.
Yeah.
So win-loss can be an incredible tool from a sales enablement perspective. So it's very powerful. If I'm a new sales rep, I just joined an organization, I'm going through my onboarding process. In order to go and sell effectively, there's things that I have to know. I need to know what's our value prop. How does that compare to the value prop of the other vendors in the space that I'm going to be selling against? Who's my ICP? So who am I actually going to be talking to as part of this sales process? And
What are the problems we solve for
what
them?
what are the problems we solve? What are the use cases? What are the industries that we perform well in? Who should I be trying to prospect into and sell to? All of these questions that are vital for me to have a good understanding about as a sales rep. If I can go and read from the buyer's mouth how they view me versus my competitor and what they think of my offering versus the other vendors and what led them out to market in the first place, what problem were they trying to solve for? If I can go and read 20 buyer conversations that took place over the last month, nothing is going to match that in terms of bringing me up to speed as a sales rep. So one thing that we'll commonly hear from clients as a unexpected surprise is a decrease in new rep ramp time, where I can come in and I can learn all these critical components to the sales process as a new rep, and it's from the most ideal source, which is directly from my buyer. So a decrease in ramp time is huge.
We actually asked our customers how big of a decrease they saw in sales rep ramp time, and they self-reported an average of 1.28 months
Yeah,
decrease in ramp time. So it's like, 1 1/3 months faster, get your reps up to speed in selling. That's
and
a
closing
big
deals.
benefit.
Yep,
Yeah.
yep. I think the other one that we'll call out for our buyers that I love to see are what we call win back opportunities. So we see these with loss interviews that we conduct. So a buyer chose another vendor. We reach out on behalf of our client to go and conduct an interview with them. And it can take on a variety of different forms, but it could be related to they picked this other vendor and implementation isn't going as well as they thought it would. And they're planning to go and reevaluate, at the turn of the contract, or the sales rep promised them some feature sets and they're not up to par or kind of how they were advertised. So there's some disappointment there. So it can take on a variety of different reasons, but it's great to go and interview these current losses, voice some dissatisfaction with their current vendor, talk about their timeline of when they're going to go out to market again to reevaluate and hear their exact pain points of what's not going well with their current vendor so that our client can go in and create a very, very tailored solution and sales pitch essentially around how they're going to be able to solve that and be a much better vendor and win that deal the second time.
I just heard a story from the CRO at Hello Heart,
Hmm.
and the day we had talked to him, he said closed just barely this week, found a win back opportunity for us. The rep had been working the deal and they had kind of ghosted him. They'd gone dark and he just marked it closed lost and was like, I guess this is not going to work out.
Yeah.
And then we reached out, performed an interview, and the buyer was like, actually, we're still interested. And actually, the timing is perfect right now. If you have them reach back out, we'll ink the deal. And it was a $500,000 deal that they thought was closed lost and they were just going to put on the shelf and be done with it. And now it's like going to be added to their goals this quarter. It's going to count towards their quota.
ROI.
Yeah, $500,000. And he's like, that more than pays for our win-loss program and like for a decade. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like, who knows I don't know how big their program is, but
Yeah.
it was like a huge deal. And it was like this one deal alone pays for it and then some.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's a cool side benefit.
When it comes to win-loss, obviously the immediate, at least in most cases, the immediate kind of return that you're looking for is or expecting is an increase in win rate, which is very understandable and should be expected. But win-loss can be a lot further reaching, where you can help out a lot of other areas of the business that ultimately contribute to that win rate, but are some cool unexpected surprises.
Yeah, well, that's awesome. Well, thank you for walking us through the win-loss maturity curve. I would like to invite our listeners, before they go, to think about, where are you at on that curve right now? Are you early on? Are you still guessing? Are you relying on anecdotes from your sales reps or opinions from your leadership to understand why you're winning and losing? Are you relying on CRM data that is probably not super accurate and only kind of gives you the what and not the why? Or are you farther along down the road? Are you starting to talk to some of your buyers and like really listen to them to understand why you're winning and losing? And depending on where you are on that curve, like, we can obviously help you out, and we would love to do that. You can give Cam a call or find him on LinkedIn. He's the win-loss guy. But yeah, thanks for tuning in. I hope that was an educational and informative overview of how savvy revenue leaders are approaching understanding their buyers by going directly to the source instead of making those speculative guesses and relying on anecdotal evidence. If you want to be data-driven, use the data that actually matters, that's relevant. So, all right, guys. Well, hopefully we'll see you on the next show. Thanks for joining us.
One last thing before you go. If you were listening to today's episode and you thought, man, I really need to get a better pulse on who my competitors really are, or maybe you recently lost a big deal and you're wondering, I want to know more about why we lost. We thought we had that in the bag. Well, I've got a special offer for you today. If you go to freebuyerinterview.com, Closed will reach out to and conduct a free buyer interview on your behalf. We'll find out all the nitty-gritty details about why you won or lost a recent deal, and then we'll share it with you for free. We'll tell you all of the things that impacted that deal. Maybe there was a person internally who blocked it. Maybe there's something that you guys did wrong in the sales process. Maybe you're missing an important product feature. Maybe another competitor swooped in and stole the deal from under your nose and you didn't know about it. We'll give you all that information for free because we want to see you win more and we want you to experience the value of win-loss analysis. So if that sounds like something you'd be interested in, just go to freebuyerinterview.com and we'll help you out.